Okay, I'm hoping the webcam won't be too crazy for this and it's going to handle it okay. Just a quick warning. It is having seizure-like color twitching, as you can see. So if you experience anything seizure related, regardless to colors and flashing lights, this video probably isn't for you. So just stick it in the background whilst you just hear what I'm talking about. I will mention once we're on screen and the webcam's off and stuff, like we're just looking at the software, you should be able to turn the video back on. Welcome to probably one of the most enjoyable controllers I've used in the last 2 years. Now, this controller was won for free in a GameSir giveaway on Twitter, or on X as people call it now. It's Twitter, don't care what anyone says. And this is the T4K. Currently retails for about £50. I think that's like $60 odd. You can get it through Amazon, you can get it through other retailers. I did find one on Amazon. It was about £49 or something like. It's basically almost £50, about $60 or something like that. Let's break down the controller. This is probably one of the most impressive controllers I think I've ever seen in the price range for what it can offer. We'll look at the top, we'll make our way to the back, and then to the triggers and the bumpers. Also, RGB lights. Let's just mention that first. This is fully controlled by the software. Again, I'm on PC. If you're not on PC and decide to use this specific controller, the controller helps building profiles with these two buttons, as well as disabling features on and off that would normally be enabled through software, which we're going to be looking at on my main screen in a bit. Let's start off with the analogs, or the sticks. These are Hall effect. Your conventional controller uses a ohm resistance based a value in order to work. So it's just two brushes that are basically brushing up against each other to create a certain resistance value. The resistance value then gets translated for the controller to understand what the input is across an X and Y axis. I think that's right. Yeah, X and Y axis pretty much. With Hall effect, there's no brushing on anything. It's pretty much, from my knowledge, two magnets and how they're interacting with each other in opposite polarity. And that's how the controller picks up a value in terms of what the input is, again, on an X and Y value. It is very, very smooth. This is probably the smoothest joystick I think I've ever felt or used in a very long time. And I've used my fair share of controllers, from Turtle Beaches to custom PS5 controllers, which also use Hall effects. I owned a Pro controller from another Xbox-like company. I keep forgetting what the name was. It was good, but that controller was pretty expensive. This is under the retail value of a current and standard Xbox Series S or X controller, and it is damn good. So, sticks, Hall effect. These actual mechanical switches inside of the D-pad, as well as the face buttons. Actually, all the buttons up top are mechanical switches. That is the faceplate on the ABXY, your D-pad, as well as your pause and share button pretty much, and the mapping controller. You do have a main Xbox button, but I don't have it mapped to anything. Could map it to something external. I haven't decided about doing that though yet. You do have a headphone jack. I don't use it. I use an audio mixing device on my PC, so I don't use the headset jack on the actual controller. If you're on Xbox, you can. Let's go to triggers real quick. Pretty standard shoulder buttons, they're nothing too fancy. They are quite tactile and spring back quite quickly. However, the triggers is where all the magic is at. So I mentioned the sticks, and the sticks are pretty good because if you build up somewhat of a stick drift, or you feel like the input isn't as you're telling the game it is, you can recalibrate the sticks. Super easy. Can be done in software, or can be done strictly on the controller. It can be fixed. Super easy. The triggers, likewise, are Hall effect. So there isn't any mechanical stuff that we can see, unfortunately, under the shell, which kind of is a little bit of a bummer. They're Hall effect. So what does that mean? Again, similar thing. There's not an ohm resistance telling it what value it's currently at. It is a magnet brushing up and go. They're not even brushing. They're just like face to face like this, and they've opposite polarity. There's a translation layer that then helps all of that, and then pretty much good to go. At the back, two paddles. Mechanical switches again. Super simple. It is got a nice textured grip on the back. Don't think the webcam will be able to pick it up, which is a bit of a bummer, but it is a textured rear grip. So we've seen what the controller looks like. We've looked at the functions of it as well as the paddles. One other thing I forgot to mention is the fact that this controller is a nice little USB-C cable. It is a recessed port, so the likeliness of you snapping it is very unlikely unless you're just whacking this thing around because you're upset. Nice little USB-C cable. It is a braided USB-C cable. It is about 2 meters long if I remember correctly. And what makes things even better is it is bloody solid. There's some sort of armor sheathing inside of it, and I'm not going to cut into this. There's some sort of armor sheathing inside of it. It is a really, really nice cable. So GameSir, honestly, build quality and functions already of the controller, cable, solid 9 out of 10. There's always room for improvement, and I'll mention why later towards the end of the video, but honestly, pretty damn good so far. Let's get into the software. Cool. So we're currently looking at the software side of the T4K. What makes it damn good is the fact that, one, you've got profiles and you've got updates. So if there's an update for the controller, you can just run an update. If it were to run mine, I'm currently up to date on the latest version, so I haven't got anything to worry about. This software, by the way, is completely free on the Microsoft Windows Store. So you're not grabbing it from some weird shady ass website. It's just straight up in the Microsoft Store and you can just grab it. It's completely for free. Let's go into the fancy stuff. So the profiles. I have 2 profiles, one for racing games and one for Call of Duty or any FPS game realistically, to be honest. It is slightly different between the two. More importantly, the triggers, the dead zones for the sticks, as well as the back paddles I've got differently set up between the racing and Call of Duty pretty much. So for me on COD, I have my back right paddle would be my jump, and this is my reload. If I need to reach over to play or melee, I just go into a temporary claw grip. It is a little bit uncomfortable, but you kind of get used to it after a while. If I was to hop into my configure settings, you can pretty much see exactly what each button has been remapped to. Like I said, I can even remap this if I wanted to something else. There's no point me remapping that. I'm not remapping. You can't even remap this if I wanted to either, which is great. Going to sticks, this is where the interesting stuff is for me. By default, the software doesn't recommend anything under 10% because the sticks are super sensitive since they're magnet based and it will basically think it's an input. So I have a 5%, I believe it is, 5% dead zone or basically no input on both sticks on this, as well as a, I think 0.05 dead zone on Call of Duty. One thing that I also saw that it's super cool to me is this raw input. So this is exactly what the controller actually sees in form of an actual input. We don't have the ability to use raw input like a mouse would. A mouse would have raw input and an accelerated input, or basically an adjusted input. We can use raw inputs on these sticks, but it's very weird and I don't recommend it. Like I played with it on ranked for about a solid week and I was like, can't do it. I disabled raw. It felt really weird because though I think I've reached the end of my input on the actual controller, the game is still detecting a further input going backwards and diagonally and stuff. It's super weird. Very difficult to get used to. So I keep that off just because it's a little bit easier. You also have max input ranges and all the good stuff across both sticks. Triggers, also something pretty cool. Like I said, I've got mine to hair triggers, so they're basically instant. I should probably disable them because they're being a little bit weird and set the value to 3. This auto saves, by the way, every time I make a setting on the actual thing. So every time I'll cross over 3 is when it will actually detect an input, which is super nice. If I set it to hair triggers, you can see an instant input, like it's 0 to 100 pretty much, or 0 to 255, actually what the input range is. So for disable hair trigger inputs, it's now smooth with it basically bottoming out, like max input range is basically halfway for me. Even though it's detecting more input, whatever, it's not really actually going to respond to that. So there's the hair trigger input. So I'm just touching it. I'm barely like, just to show you, that's barely in. I've pulled that maybe 3 millimeters back and the game is detecting an input, which is bloody amazing. Absolutely beautiful. But if we turn the hair triggers off, it goes back to its conventional full depth kind of racing game style. We have some vibration control as well. I've got them disabled. RGB controls, obviously, we're gamers now. Everything has to be RGB from your keyboard. My mouse isn't RGB, thank the Lord for that. But we have some RGB control for the controller itself. We also have some motion input too. So motion is actually super weird the way it describes it, because it's talking about gyro inputs, as the controller does have a gyro and an accelerator inside of it. The controller has a setting of two different things. Either the gyro stuff, which is on the right hand side here, which I've got disabled. I'm never using gyro inside of an FPS game. That stinks. I hate when we're doing it in Warzone 1 just for better recoil, because it was horrible. It also has dedicated input response curves. So right now the controller is set to aiming. So that means that the right stick can have a changed input response curve regardless of what's already running inside of Call of Duty or Siege or whatever it may be that you're playing with this controller. Kind of cool, I'm not gonna lie. But I leave it on default just because if I'm changing the input response on this specific controller, on this specific analog, and then I do it also inside of Call of Duty, it's going to be like basically having double the response curve type. So it's basically scaling it by 2 instead of scaling it by 1. So I've just got it on default pretty much. The one thing I wanted to mention, which is the calibration, it pretty much takes place up here. Once I've entered this, I can then hit the calibration button, which is up top. And then I'll be able to calibrate it. I'm not doing that right now. I don't need to calibrate the controller. The controller was calibrated literally a week and a half ago. Or like 2 weeks now? 2 weeks since since Black Ops has come out. The controller was recalibrated just basically after I started playing it. I was like, I'm going to recalibrate it just to make sure I'm 100% comfortable with the controller. So you can recalibrate it at whatever time that you may need. In terms of software, for what this can do, the software is an absolute 10 out of 10. Though what I would like to see from GameSir would be the fact that I'm only able to do one specific stick with an input response curve. It would be nice if I can do both, just to make my life a little bit easier. Because I wouldn't mind doing like a smooth input response curve on the actual left stick and keep the right on default. But at this point, it's just a tiny little minute thing that I'd like to see changed. Honestly, the software is bloody insane. I actually love the software. The software is so good. I'm not even glazing. Yes, I got it for free, but if I paid for this, again, I'll just be completely honest. Like, the software is so damn good. The only thing I wanted to see with this controller, instead of them being tactile mechanical buttons up top, I would have loved to seen these top switches be almost digital to a sense, in a sense of like how we have in a mouse, like mouse click style, just but like almost instant, instant, and I mean instant response, like hair trigger stuff. Alternatively, it would have also been cool. The top buttons, apart from them being mechanical, also had some form of light up underneath, like some form of lights under them. But at that point, I'm just cherry picking because it would have been cool. But I do like the accent of the RGB strip, and it is kind of like neon themed. It's super cool. It's a clear design with like a frosted part towards the bottom of the handle, but then as you appear to the top where you can see the PCB and everything, it is no longer frosted. It is super cool design. I have been using it for about 6 months now. It is really good. If I was to recommend this controller, I'd say if you're in the market for a new controller because yours is dying, stick drift, whatever it may be, grab one of these. Grab a GameSir T4 if you're on an Xbox, if you're on a PC, and you're looking for a controller that's going to last for a really long time. I genuinely believe this is one of those. The Hall effect sticks, the software mapping, the tactile buttons at the top. I genuinely do not see myself going away from this controller for a while. I may go back and forth between using this and my AIM controller's custom PS5 controller, which is currently in repairs, which is why I got this 6 months ago. That controller's been in the bin waiting to get fixed for 6 months. It's somewhere in Poland. It's going through repairs, but I don't know where it's at. But then when it does come back, I obviously will do a review on it, just because it is a damn mighty fine controller. But this takes the case for price to performance. I'm not even gonna lie, like, it's just so damn good. And it's on a heavier side just because of the motors. I might just go and open it up and take the motors out, but I'm gonna leave the motors for now. So recommendation is definitely up there. You're on an Xbox, on a PC, this probably would be my go-to controller to pick up. And I'm not even joking. It is such a nice controller, and it feels really good. Like, the paddles are just in the right spot. That's kind of the sweet spot for them, for me personally. The textured back, the frosted into standard coating on the top. Like, honestly, just a really nice controller that plays really well. So if I was looking for a new controller, this would be the one. The GameSir T4 would probably be the one. And I'm being deadly serious about that. I've played on like 8 different controllers across 3 years, across 2 consoles. or rather across 2 different platforms, that being PC and PS5, and this is the one that I would stick to. I can't use it on a PlayStation, but with a bit of Zim trickery and some other stuff going on, which I would never actually do, technically you can use this controller. If you enjoyed the video, hit a like, hit a sub. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.